Hi, welcome to the Pearls and Polish podcast. I'm your host, Rachel, coming to you from just outside Sacramento, California. If this is your first time watching the channel, welcome. I'm so excited to spend a bit of time with you. If you're a returning viewer, welcome back. This episode is going to be a little different than what we typically do here on the channel. Normally, I have a variety of projects that I've either finished or that I'm currently working on, and I talk about them and things that I'm working on and things I like and things I'm struggling with and things I'm learning through the process. However, today I wanted to take some time and look at different kinds of yarns and the patterns that I would pick to go with them when it comes to sock knitting. At the time of this recording, I have knit 136 pairs of socks. That's a lot of socks. Most of them I keep for myself, some I give away, but I really enjoy knitting socks, and I've knit quite a few at this point. So that does mean I've learned a couple things as far as patterns that go really well with different types of yarns. So I wanted to share some of my knowledge with all of you. Any of the dyers that I mention in today's episode and any of the pattern designers I mention in today's episode are all going to be linked down below so you can check them out for yourself and maybe find something new that you want to try out. So let's get started with yarns. All of the yarns I'm going to show you are hand-dyed yarn. I personally love working with hand-dyed yarn. I love the different colors that you can get, the different effects you can get. I also love supporting small businesses. A lot of the time, these hand-dyed yarns are dyed by women. And a lot of times those are like working moms. And so I personally just love supporting that. And I'm in a place financially where I can make that choice. You will be able to find all of these different types of yarns in a commercial yarn. And a commercial yarn is yarn that's dyed by a machine so that it can be mass produced. And those tend to be a little more cost effective because they can produce them on a bigger scale than something that is hand dyed. Either one is going to give you a great pair of socks and great results. So don't get too hung up on that you have to use hand dyed yarn to get certain effects or certain looks from your knitting projects, because it's not true. So I went through my personal stash and I pulled out examples of what I would call the 4 categories of dyeing styles in yarn. So I wanted to not only tell you about it, but I wanted to show you what I'm talking about when I say something like tonal or variegated or speckles. So in that way, you know what I'm talking about, and we're both speaking the same language. So we'll start with our first category, which are tonals. And another one I put them together was solids. So these are 2 of my many yarns that kind of fit into this category. So these are what I would call either tonals or solids. So this kind of burgundy one, I would call a tonal. You do get a little bit of variation in the color, and that's just the dye style. But for the most part, it is all the same color. I don't know how much this light from the window is going to play with us. But this is absolutely beautiful. This one is by Woolberry. The colorway is called Emily Bronte's Unfinished Manuscript, and it's on their Berry Cozy Sock base. Oh, that's the other thing I forgot to mention. Most, if not all, I'm pretty sure of these yarns are going to be some sort of merino nylon blend. This other one, this is what I would call a great example of a solid. This one is by Explorer Knits and Fibers, and this is their Denali sock base. And the colorway is called Visualization, and this is a great example of a solid. There is no variation in this color whatsoever. It is the same color all the way through. And I love that. So what are some patterns that you could pick that would go great with a tonal and or a solid? So patterns that I would pick to go with either a tonal or a solid. When I'm looking at patterns for a yarn like this, I want to look at something that is going to take all of your attention. So this would be something like cables, lace, heavy textures where you don't want your eye competing between the yarn and the texture or the cable or a lace design from your sock. So those are all great choices for something like this because it lets the texture, the pattern of the sock be kind of the main focus of the project. So I actually went through some of my projects. Some of these I've done, some of these I have not done yet, but they're on my list. But these are some patterns that I would suggest you check out for something like this. So the Intersection Socks by Marceline Smith. It's a beautiful cabled pattern that would look great with this. And then the Little Black Socks by Summer Lee. Those have a really great cable along the sides where something like this would be great, and that it will just let the cable kind of be the main attraction in your project. There are some other great lace, cable, or heavy texture patterns out there, but for the sake of time, I only picked one or two to go with these. So look for something like that for your solids and your tonals. All right, next up are Varigated, and Varigated is really fun. I feel like it's really been having its moment in kind of the knitting world for several years now. But I grabbed two different examples of kind of what a variegated looks like. Variegated is yarn with variation. That's kind of how I remember it. So I grabbed two examples to show you. And they're both a little different as far as variegated, but they're both considered variegated yarns. So this blue one, I think I was holding it upside down actually. This one is by Ruby and the Yarn Co. And at the time of this recording, I believe the dyer Molly was transitioning out of running her yarn business. So this is one from my stash that I've had for a while. But this color is called Ravenclaw. And you'll be able to see pretty heavily in this yarn, there's lots of shades of blue, but there's a whole different range of blue. You've got some really nice light blues, you've got some sea blues, you've got some dark, almost turquoise, some aquas, you've got some navies down here. And so this is a nice variegated yarn because you have variety in the color. So that's a great example of that. This yarn does have some speckling, and a lot of times you'll see, kind of right here, a lot of times you'll see variegated yarn with speckles, and we'll kind of talk about that as well. But then you also have kind of the softer side of the variegated yarn. So here is another Woolberry, and I'm actually going to pull the label off so you can see this really well. But this is another variegated. So you do have that light pale yellow as the base, but you've got some green, you've got some peach, some gold. This will give you a great look too. And so even though you do have a variety of colors, it's very subtle. And this is also a great example of a variegated yarn. This one is called Flutter Wings, and this is on their Berry Cozy sock base. Let's see if I can get the label back on here. But these are two great examples of a variegated yarn. So this is what I would call slightly busier yarn. Your eye gets attracted to all the different colors, and you're trying to figure out what the colors are doing with yarn like this. So for yarn like this, I would do something that has a light texture. Two patterns that I picked out are Vanilla's the New Black by Anne Fletcher. That one is a great vanilla sock that has a really interesting heel construction. And the other one I would pick out would be the Kindling socks by Lindsey Fowler. That has a little bit of rib, a little bit of texture, but it's still going to let your eye go straight to the colors of the yarn rather than trying to be fighting with the pattern. Now, we just talked about tonals and solids and how cables or really heavy textures would work great with that. Those would still work beautifully with this. Cables might fight a bit with this yarn color, but cables would look beautiful with something like this, where it's a lot subtler, a lot more like a watercolor look. So there's always kind of a case by case basis on what would be a great match for your yarn to your pattern. Now, of course, if you really love cables and you want to do cables with this, no one's stopping you. Go for it. But like I said, these are kind of guidelines as to what may work best. All right, next up are speckles. I feel like people either really love speckles or they really struggle with speckles. I love speckles. Speckles are another one that you could either have really heavy color or you could have a really light dusting of speckles. But I grabbed these two from my stash. Another Woolberry. I was a part of the Woolberry collective, or like their yarn club, a couple years ago. So I have quite a bit of Woolberry in my stash. And then this purple one is Magpie. So this one by Woolberry is called Diamond Wedding Anniversary Cake on their Berry Cozy Sock. And you see all these different pops of color. So we've got some red, we've got some yellow. Actually, let me pull the label off of this one as well. That might help. We get some green. We have some really heavy green speckling here. We've got some purples. And it's all on this really light base. Let me move my hand. You can see these reds here. So you have this light cream base and then you have these big pops of color. And I think those are just beautiful. This one by Magpie, let me turn it this way, Magpie Fibers is on their Swanky Sock base. And this is a merino cashmere nylon blend. And again, you have that base color of the light purple, but you've got a lot of like heavier speckles. So you've got different shades of purple. You can see that purple really deep here. We've got some greens. And if I get a little closer, I also see some reds. I see some yellows. I see some blues. So that's going to give you a lot different effect. And then there are some colorways that it's just speckles, and I love those. Unfortunately, I don't have any in my stash currently to show you. I've worked them all up. But these are just two examples of speckles that are really fun. They're kind of loud, but they get your attention quickly. So what is a pattern that you would want for something like this? Actually, those two look really pretty together. That would be fun to mix those. So I would pick something with light texture as well, similar to what I would pick for like a variegated yarn. String of Lights by Socratry would be a great choice. It's a broken rib, so it lets you focus more on the yarn, but it still gives you a nice stretch and some variety with the rib sock. The Slack Tied Socks by Lindsey Fowler is also a great ribbed pattern that just lets the yarn really shine through. Could you do something like a lace with this? Absolutely, you could. It might fight a little bit with the speckles, but there's nothing stopping you from doing something like a lace or a little heavier texture with a speckled yarn. The last type of yarn I want to talk about are self-striping. And that's kind of self-explanatory. It is a yarn that is dyed to give you stripes. And these are two examples of that. This one is by Nomadic Yarns, and this is on their Twisty Sock base. And the colorway is called Most Ardently. It's from their Pride and Prejudice collection. And here it looks a little crazy. But the nice thing about self-striping yarns is, for the most part, there's some sort of rhyme or reason to it. I believe this is a 6 color stripe repeat. So you get 6 stripes and then it repeats itself. So we've got some navy blue, some light purple, some dark purple, yellow, and a green. And that, let me cover my face. So that works up in kind of these thicker stripes that look just beautiful. This one is by Comfy Cozy Knits, and I actually won this one as a prize. This is called Vacation Mode On, and it's on their self-striping merino nylon sock yarn. And I don't know how many stripes are here. I've got some blue, I've got some pink, I've got some purple, I've got some yellow, and so those will also work up in some stripes. I've seen some people do really amazing things with self-striping yarn. Personally, I don't like to compete with self-striping yarn. I like the stripes to be the main attraction. So a great pattern for that would be the Heel Toe Do-Si-Do by the Crazy Sock Lady. It lets the stripes be the center of attention, but the way that the sock is designed, it gives you kind of a chevron stripe look to it. That's not hard to do at all. And then I also love the Kindling socks by Lindsey Fowler. That's another great pattern. It has a little bit of texture, but is still going to let the stripes just kind of be the main attraction and just draw your eyes to those rather than a really texture heavy pattern. So those are the 4 categories of sock yarn that I kind of work with the most. But there's one type of pattern we haven't talked about at all. And this type of pattern would work well for any of these sock yarns, and that is a vanilla sock. If you are newer to sock knitting, we have a lot of phrases that we use, and if you don't know, you don't know. So a vanilla sock is something that's just plain. It's simple, it's reliable, it's vanilla. So that could be either be a sock that you start from the cuff and work all the way down to the toe, or it could be a sock that you work from the toe and work up to the cuff. The most common heel constructions are the heel flap and gusset or a short row heel. There are other types of heels out there, but those are the most common. I would also add the afterthought heel, or it has other names, a peasant heel, a cut-in heel, but they're all essentially the same, where you insert your heel after you're done with your sock. That is a great way to showcase any of these yarns, because whether it is a self-striping yarn, a solid, or a variegated, or a speckle, any of these yarns are going to look fantastic with a vanilla sock, because you just let the yarn showcase and just be. So there's nothing competing with your eye with like a pattern. Now, I will say, as much as I love a vanilla sock, it can be a little repetitive, which is why a lot of people like picking textures or patterns or cables just to kind of keep them invested or interested. But there's nothing wrong with a vanilla sock. And for a lot of these, that's kind of my go-to. I would pick a vanilla sock for something like this with all the speckles so that we can enjoy the speckles. I would do a vanilla sock for self-striping so I can just enjoy the stripes. I would do a vanilla sock for a solid or a tonal for someone who doesn't like a whole lot of texture, or if I am going to be really busy and I just need something repetitive and calming, or if I just really want to enjoy these kind of watercolor tones, I would go with a vanilla sock. And the pattern I would suggest is actually the one that I've written. So I've written the foundation socks, and that's going to be linked down below. It is a free pattern on Ravelry. It's a great pattern, I think, because I designed it. But like I said, these are all just suggestions. If you really love cables and you want to do cables on a self-striping yarn or something with a heavy pattern, or go for it. There's nothing stopping you. But I just wanted to share some of the things that I've learned over the years of knitting lots and lots of socks. So I would love to hear in the comments, what are some of your go-to types of sock yarns, some of your go-to dyers, or some of your go-to patterns? What are patterns that you really enjoy knitting up when it comes to knitting socks? Thanks for joining me for this special edition episode. I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, please throw those in the comments down below. And as always, please make sure you like and subscribe so you get a notification anytime we have a new episode come out. I will see you next time. Bye.